Hello, welcome all to this webcast on art of storytelling in L&D. I am Rohan, your co-host, and I'm joining from Mumbai. I want to thank all of you for making time on this Thursday afternoon to be a part of this event. Much appreciated as people keep trickling in. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to congratulate each one of you for the miraculous rescue of 41 workers trapped in Uttarakhand. That was quite a feat, and congratulations to all the people who were involved, and congratulations to us as citizens of this proud country. So, having said that, on a good note, I want to get started into the topic. So, today we have a power pack session. We want to present some ideas to you, but we also want to hear from you. So this is not going to be just us talking. We are not teaching here. We're not educating you. We're just trying to share something which we think could be of value for you. So before we begin, certain things I would like to put on the table for you to know what this session is about. So firstly, the way we are approaching this session is use of storytelling as a business approach, as a business tool, as a business mindset, as a business skill set, rather than a content strategy. So, the idea behind today's webcast is not to tell you, you want to make stories, great. This is the content strategy you should follow, because if you wanted to do that we would have called the marketing folks, right? We are completely aware that you are from the HR side, particularly from learning and development, and based on today's statistics, there is a heavy inclination of people. Almost, I think, two-third people attending this webcast are from L&D. So we've made this webcast keeping in mind this particular facet. So we wanted you to appreciate this before we begin. Secondly, just feel free to ask a question, to comment, to share your experiences. Of course, we'll solicit your interaction as well as we go through this webcast. But having said that, it's no harm to really say that. We've received some 170 or 180 registrations for this webcast. And suffice to say, we got almost 50 to 60 questions. Now, obviously, we can't take all those questions. We had to skim through questions. So we took 4 or 5 questions that we think were very good, were very insightful in their characteristic, and we've chosen those questions. So Mandar and I will be taking those questions. But as I said, we will also take your questions throughout this session. And so hang on till the end, right? Hang on till the end for these questions. These questions are really interesting. And we have a very good attendance today. I think almost 43 people are here on the call today. So great. Good to see that. Good to see a good response. That means this topic is of interest to a lot of people, which we get. All right. So I want to make sure that all of you behind your laptops are paying full attention. And so we are going to share what we think or what we believe about this topic. But we also want to hear from you what you think. How can storytelling help in L&D, right? Whatever that opinion is. So this is something bit of a KBC style kind of session. So here are your options. By making learning faster. B, by helping to convey a huge amount of information in very simple way. Or C, by making learning more relatable and engaging. Or last option, D, by establishing emotional connect between employees and L&D team. So please feel free to enter either A or B. So this is KBC style. So it's not like multiple choice. It's only one question, one answer that makes sense. So kindly just feel free. I'll take, let's say, maybe next 15-20 seconds to wait for your responses. And I think those are trickling in. Oh, see. Okay. A lot of you people are really smart. A lot of C's I see. Sanjeev says B. Okay. Overwhelmingly, it's C. That's interesting. Derek, no, it's not all. It's KBC style, as I said. So it's just one option. I'm sorry, I'm not Amitabh Bachchan to convey that in a very gravitas manner.
All of this seems right to me. So I wouldn't say any of this is incorrect. So that's
Right.
why I went with all. Yeah.
But it's like, in Supreme Court, you have all the judges are same, but it's first among the equals, the CGI, the Chief Justices. So it's something like that, if I can use that analogy. Yes, you guys are right. It is C. It is to make learning more relatable and engaging. Now, these are not just English words. Relatable and engaging are not just English words. It really means something. So, why relatable? Anything that strikes you as relatable sends a signal in your mind that this is relevant to me. What happens in this particular situation is relevant to my life or my situation or my context. So it's got to be relatable and engaging. Engaging is that your attention doesn't drop off. You don't look and don't twiddle your thumbs. So it's got to be relatable and engaging. And if your learning is able to achieve that, I would say bang on. I mean, you've done your job as L&D professionals or even HR professionals, or for that matter, anybody who's using storytelling, right? So yes, the other options may be there, may not be there, but yes, it's C. So thank you, folks, for that response. I'm happy to know you're all there, alive and kicking behind your laptops. All right, let me take this ahead now. Introduction to banta hai. So hi everybody, good evening. We are basically a niche team of business storytellers, right? Now, the way we use storytelling is we employ principles of design thinking uh, to create those stories. Now, what is the objective of these stories? The objective of these stories is not entertainment or content for the sake of content, it's to create a culture of storytelling where it's for everybody in the organization, irrespective of your function, department, seniority, etc., etc. Right? It's a skill set. So you can use storytelling as a skill, but you can also use it as a business approach to really humanize the way you communicate with your stakeholders, whomsoever your stakeholders is. And you would agree, your stakeholders will depend on your function and your seniority in the organization. So that's our approach. So we work with talent TA folks, L&D people, CHROs, HRBPs, so on and so forth. In fact, sales people as well. We have worked with CSR people to create stories, because stories are relatable to all the different functions, because different functions have their own stakeholders, right? So we work with that. So that's a quick introduction to what we do. Let me introduce ourselves as well before we move ahead. So hi, as I mentioned, I am Rohan Poddar. I am the chief storyteller and managing partner. Just to give you a background, why this is relevant to you, why I am the person to tell you this is, I, from a formal training perspective, I'm an engineer and an MBA in marketing. I did my MBA in marketing in 2007. Post that, I worked with various IT companies in corporate sales and marketing roles. And at some point, I felt that I had a more entrepreneurial calling. That's when I left my corporate life in 2016 and started this company. I was joined by Mandar, who is our co-host today on this webinar. He's my MBA colleague as well as a dear friend. And over the last 6 to 7 years, we have moved this company, so to speak, call it a company, call it a firm, call it an agency, whatever you like, from being a video company, production company to storytelling company, because we realize that no matter what tool we use, we are telling stories at the end of the day. That is the source of what we do. So we went to the source and we thought, why not come up with and create really great stories for business people. Now, just to give you my credibility, I am a IDEO certified storyteller for influence. What is IDEO, you may ask? IDEO is a world-renowned design agency based in US. They are a 40-year-old agency, and I've learned storytelling from them as to calibrate my knowledge internationally. But I have been a storyteller for the last 6, 7 years in various capacities, right? Uh, as a philosophy, I believe that storytelling is both art as well as a science. So that's the philosophy I believe in. But enough about me. I'll have Mandar introduce himself to take this webinar forward. So over to you, Mandar.
Hi, thanks, Rohan, and warm welcome to all of you for joining in today. I'll keep it short. Rohan likes long stories, so quick introduction. Similar to Rohan, I come from an engineering background. We were classmates in our MBA days in marketing. My corporate experience has mainly been in market research. So I started my corporate journey with IMRB, handled brand tracking research for a long time for FMCG, banking, IT companies. My journey as an entrepreneur has been almost 12 years now, uh, into various domains of business, from branding, marketing, till I made the switch to facilitation and understanding L&D as a deeper aspect. Because when we got in touch with these L&D people, I wanted to understand what's running in their mind. How can we help them achieve their business goals? So that's how I also ended up joining this course with KPMG some time ago. And as part of our team, I primarily take care of the facilitation for the various workshops that we conduct. We also do a lot of consulting assignments with clients from across industries. And in short, I and Rohan are passionate storytellers. We help brands humanize their communication, whether it is with their internal or external stakeholders. And we firmly believe uh, human mind responds better to emotions. And that is where storytelling as a hook can help us connect with the audience better. So over to you, Rohan. Let's start today's session.
All right. So yeah, in
Just
fact, I'll let Mandar take this up before I take up the next
now, from the context that Rohan gave, I just want to focus on emphasize on these 2 points, that when we talk of storytelling with you L&D people, or with HR teams or business teams who handle change management, marketing teams, it cannot be just storytelling for fun, right? It has to have a purpose attached to it.
one. Sorry, Mandar, I muted you by mistake.
Oh, that's okay. Uh, so, like I said, we need to highlight these two crucial points before we move ahead in this entire session, right? Uh, Storytelling has to have an end purpose in mind. Because when you ask for your teams to participate in this exercise, when you ask your business heads for funds to create these stories, these initiatives, they will obviously ask you, what's the effectiveness, right? What will we achieve with these stories? What's the end result? And that can happen only and only if the stories that we craft are relatable to our audience, right? Let's say we enter a movie hall and we don't shed a tear, we don't have a laugh. Would you think you will go out and recommend that movie to any of your friends or families? If you couldn't relate to the characters in that movie, the script, we will not recommend it, right? Similarly, when you create a story and you use that as a platform to inspire your workforce or maybe your external vendors, whoever it is, if you are not able to trigger a particular emotion within them, if you're not able to push them towards a specific action, then I think the story is not going to be worth it, right? So let's keep these 2 pointers at the top of our mind, that our story has to have a purpose, it has to be relatable, and the end result will be that we will somehow make sure that our audience goes on the path of a specific action that we want them to take. With that in mind, I want to share with you something which we always, quote as an example of what is effective storytelling. How do you create an experiential learning within a story? To set a context, a lot of times we hear, let's say, as a financial security thing, the government or the agencies might tell us 10 things, don't share your sensitive details with XYZ, or they might give us a lot of messages on health. But quite often, what happens is in the rush of our day, we, just skim through those messages. We don't pay that much more importance. Maybe you pay more importance to the notifications that come from social media, but not to these kind of important communications. So what is it that can happen in this scenario? How can these messages be conveyed in a better way? How can the audience get engaged in these messages? So, let me take just a minute and a half to share a beautiful story with you, and that will set the context for today's session. Just give me a second to share.
Just let us know if you're able to hear the audio in the chat. Anybody will do. Just give a thumbs up if the audio is okay. Cool. Mandar, we can start from the beginning. Maybe. I hope the video is smooth to all. Yeah, yeah, same here. Soumya, video seems to be a little bit. Hopefully, it should stabilize. Right,
Right. So, that is how a simple message, which many would have just overseen, uh, can be reinforced in a very interactive way. You immerse your audience in something, and then you pass on the critical message, right? So that is a simple example that we wanted to share with you on how a story can be structured, right? And when Rohan mentioned that we use design thinking as a approach to structure these stories, this approach helps us structure these stories in a way. Now, design thinking consists of five critical steps. When we talk of storytelling or business storytelling as such. So let me just run you through each of these, and please feel free to stop us at any time or type something in the chat box if you want us to elaborate more on something. Now, the first critical aspect of any story is to empathize with your audience, right? What is the demographics? What is the psychographics of the audience? What will motivate them to take the action that you intend them to take? What is the key motivator, right? The second step of this process is uh, to discover the storytelling moment, right? Now you know that you have a audience in front of you. You know the psychographics, what is the emotional hook for that audience. Now you need to understand what is the big idea that I want to convey to my audience. And if this big idea is to be conveyed, what is an appropriate moment to convey that big idea, right? To give you a simple example, let us consider some case that we were working, right? So we were working with a cement company a few years ago, and they had a huge sales team. They are primarily based in south of India, are not that present in the north of our country. And what happened is, over a period of years, they have developed a portfolio of about 6 to 8 different variants, and they wanted to enter the market where people develop their own homes, and they wanted these self home builders or these people who sometimes retire or want to take a piece of land and build their own home. They wanted to launch a premium product for them, and they wanted that these people should themselves recommend this product to their contractor or their architect. So typically what happens in cement is you will not be involved in that particular decision. What you will be involved as a house owner, or your family, your spouse, will be more in the aesthetics, right? The furniture or the electronics or the tiles which give the external look, but not in the cement part of it. Now they had this huge sales team spread across south of India, and they wanted to push this particular product. So we help their L&D team structure stories on, what's the big idea that you want your sales guys to push? What's the correct storytelling moment when your sales guys meet the person who's buying these stocks from you? Or what is the storytelling moment when an architect or a contractor is meeting the client? Now, how do you structure this? Because there are 100 things that will come in your mind, right? So what design thinking says is you need to structure your problem into a how might we statement. So we call it a how might we tell a story statement, right? And this statement talks about the intended outcome, the purpose, the characters, all of that. And from here, the divergent thinking starts. You play around with different ideas. Typically, what psychology says is that the first three, four ideas are just your warm up, right? Then you get into the thick of things. Now, once you have this divergent thinking and a clear structure in terms of a how might we statement or how might we tell a story kind of a format, then we get on to what are the critical components of the story. Like they typically say there are five character components, there are five C's, which are typically your characters, your conflict, the action that you want the audience to take. So these five corners or pillars of the story then get crafted, and then you choose what is the method in which I'll narrate the story. So, you can tell the story as a live action video. It can be a cartoon strip. It can be a book. It can be an email. No, it can be a blog. Now, once you are able to understand all of these factors, then you sharpen your narrative. You test it on a target audience. It can be like a close focus group discussion, or you take a small sample set of your audience, of your contractors. And that is when you get to understand what is the critical elements of the story. Does this big idea really click? Okay? Does this big idea register with your audience? And then you start refining the story.
All right. So what Mandar showed you was how a story is made. These are simple set of questions you can ask. You don't have to be a marketing guy. You don't have to be a branding guy to create stories, and that's a myth that we always try to break when we are speaking to our prospective clients as well. That storytelling is everybody's forte, and it has to be because that's how humans communicate. That's how humans learn. So what you saw is that we have adapted design thinking in a set of simple questions that you can use in any situation to craft a story. So as I mentioned, I'm trying to underline this here that it you need to understand that the storytelling is not just a forte of a brand guy or a content guy. It is everybody's forte. It's don't just view storytelling in the context of of piece of content. It is a mindset, right? So you could use storytelling as a in a town hall as well, right? So there are various forms and formats and mediums where storytelling can be used. Now, in this section, I want to draw your attention to some key areas in L&D where storytelling can be used. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've taken four key areas of L&D. And again, just putting a caveat, we are not experts in L&D per se, so we are not competing with your knowledge of L&D. We've just picked up four that we felt is typical for an L&D person. If we've been wrong about it, so apologies in advance. Having said that, let's look at the first one, skill development. I'm sure most of you in this webinar will agree that skill development is an important part of your KRA. Now, what we've done is for each of the areas, we looked at two scenarios. First is your typical traditional scenario, how you do things currently, and a possible storytelling based scenario that you could look at. Right. So let's look at the traditional one first. How would you deliver a skill based training? You typically have a classroom training, maybe online training. It's a very heavily technical, so there are instructional videos and manuals. You might have a classroom session. Of course there will be assignments and all of that. But what we've observed, and we as an SA, when I say we, it means what we've learned from our L&D customers, is that mostly employees struggle to see the practical application of a very heavy technical topic. So, for example, cyber security. Cyber security is about protocols, legislations, and whatnot, right? And I don't know what it is about. It's not my domain. But clearly, if you have to deliver a cyber security training, it will. I can imagine how that would look like if I have to sit through it. Now, let's say, let's use our left and right brain thinking. Let's try and empathize with our learners who are learning this technical training. We want to create interest for this. What we do. So here's what we can do from a storytelling point. So let's say we break the whole technical training into episodic content. So each episode represents one particular story. Let's pick a character. This character could be head of cyber security. He could be a cyber security lead or whatever you want to pick. Pick one character in each episode he encounters a very specific technical problem. So maybe sometimes it's a phishing attack on his corporate website, sometimes it's data hacking, whatever. So we take one problem per episode and how he solves these problems. So whatever he does to solve that problem, he may have to consult with his team, he may have to use a certain tool, he may have to report it to some people, whatever that standard operating procedure is. What if we show this in form of a story, right? So each story is one situation. That would really help a learner to understand organically, because then, if you recollect, relatable and meaningful, it becomes relatable to him. Beyond just words and heavy English and heavy technical jargon, it becomes relatable in a real life scenario. Of course, you want your participants to get involved as well. So there will be points where we can create interactive or interaction between the participant and the learning content, right? Through simulations, where we create scenarios and we ask participants, if you were into this person's situation, what would you do next, right? And then they can choose the options, and then that happens. Some of the mediums that we think will make sense in this is, of course, animation. You must have heard of gamification, and there are games and where animations is used to really draw and imagine a situation. Motion graphics, you create a certain simple videos on motion graphics to elucidate that particular situation. And one interesting part is role play. You could have, actually, if it's a classroom training, why don't you do a role play? You can have, in every session you can have somebody becoming a character, somebody becoming a client or a internal person, whatever. You can set up a role play. That would be one way to do it, right? To storytelling. So you can embed storytelling in the learning content, as is what we are trying to say here. So this is one way. Again, caveat is that this is not the way. There are multiple ways we can approach it. What stories will make sense, as I said, is a function of those questions that Mandar showed you a few slides back, and asking those questions, getting answers to those questions, and then this is just an example of what we can do. Okay. Um, if you have any questions so far, just leave it. I didn't realize. Okay, this is comment by Octolio. I'm sorry, or he or she. I'm really not sure. So apologies. I didn't realize content creators were only guys. Okay. All right, so let me move to the second part, which L&D people focus on, which is leadership development. That's important part of many L&D folks. Now let's look at the standard way of doing things, right? Standard way is that online modules, typically leaders are very busy people. You probably won't call them to a classroom training. You may or may not call. Again, it depends on the company and all that. So we're just assuming certain things here. But let's say our online modules, those have a lot of theory lecture, lessons on leadership theory, decision making frameworks, communication strategy, strategic thinking, etc., etc. You would do this through text, video lectures, case studies, which they can go through at their own time. All of that online assessment. Uh, Again, the problem that comes here is this is all fine. Like if somebody says, if public speaking, for example, I can teach you public speaking, the principles of public speaking, but you have to go and speak in public, right? So what do we do? So the real world is where the gap happens. Trying to imagine. So let's see if we can use storytelling here. Here we can do a series of leadership journey stories. So let's do one. Let's pick a leader or multiple leaders, let's say. Let's tell their stories. And these stories will be properly curated. So each story will be focused on one leader, and that story will delve into the journey that leader has taken, the failures, the mistakes he committed, what he learned, the decisions he made, why he made those decisions, right? It could be very engaging, right? No, I'm not here saying that you get rid of the traditional part, which is theory and lessons. All I'm saying is you're looking at ways to really bump up, to really up the ante, right? And that's what we are suggesting here. So I'm not saying that storytelling is a substitution for what you're traditionally doing. No, and what you've been doing is all wrong. I'm not saying that. So let me clarify that here. Storytelling is that additional element, a zing that you can bring in to make it more effective. Of course, simulation, so you create a lot of scenarios. So scenario building is also an integral part of storytelling. So there's this example that I keep giving, right? HBO. HBO is a very popular company in America. they initially were a cable based company, so you had to purchase cable TV subscriptions from them. But when OTT came in, more smartphones came in, they were in a bit of a spot because now they were competing with OTT apps, and their business was heavily based on that. So and this again comes from IDEO, the hired IDEO, which is the design thinking firm that I mentioned about. And so what they did was a team of IDEO experts built a lot of scenarios for the executives at HBO to imagine. So how would, if you get on the path of OTT, or try and reach people through different screens. The screens are smart screens, smartphone screens. What would your path look like in 2 years from now, 5 years from now? So they actually create a simple scenario across a huge wall in the office. So every time an executive walked in, you would see that if you were to change our path today from being a cable heavy company to being a mobile friendly company to a OTT friendly company in terms of delivering content, what is it that we need to do? What would it look like? All of that in a very simple scenario across a wall, right? So scenario building is an important part of it. That could be, in fact, a way of leadership training. Medium, live action videos. Why live action videos is because if I'm going to be telling a story about a leader, I want to see that leader. I don't want a leader to be fictitious. So what if we have the leader and feature the leader in the story itself? And live action is basically having real people. It's not a animation or some graphics that we use real people. That's what live action means in simple words. So we can use live action. Podcasts is another great it's a longer format, but typically podcasts create a lot of engagement because people who listen to podcasts, they probably will listen to on their headphones when they're doing or working on something or they're traveling, but the engagement levels are very high on a podcast. Illustrations is one way. In fact, we helped one plastic manufacturing company to create a set of illustrations on their leadership stories. So these are some of the mediums. Again, I'm saying this is not an exhaustive list of mediums. There could be many more. For I'll let Mandar take over the next part.
Uh, Great. I'm sure this is one of the core agendas for a lot of you. It comes under your domain. How do you make your workforce, look at inclusion, this work on global projects? So an interesting example which comes to my mind is last year we were working with a company which is a European chocolate maker, and they are very active, when they make these videos on DNI or these annual videos where they show what's happening in the workforce, what's new, what's keeping people together. But somehow in the post, uh, surveys that they conduct when these campaigns are launched, they found that somehow the Indian, workforce is still not as open to these scenarios, is not that engaged with these campaigns. And they realized that though they're covering DNI as an aspect, what was happening is because it was a global conglomerate, sometimes Asian faces are there, but Indian faces are not there, right? And that was one of the things that we found out in some of our discussions with their people, that they would love to see Indian faces. So India does not want to be represented by Asian faces, Southeast Asian faces. And that is how the next time we got on to making some stories for them, we also made some leadership development stories for them. We made sure that their campaign next time will integrate some of the things that we. And, like Rohan mentioned, how do we compare a typical DNI training that is delivered through traditional frameworks uh, compared to a storytelling format, right? So I'm sure you have created a lot of these experiences in your organizations earlier. This can be something which you can again ponder upon, fireside chats, which create a very informal way for people to connect. Can you share stories? So we once worked with Mahindra where they wanted to create a story on how they are a diverse employer, and for that we took real life employees, unfiltered stories on. We went to their homes, we went to where they visit, what kind of life they live. So people like to probably need to relate more to these unfiltered stories, not fiction, something which is really happening in a human being's life. And I'm sure you can explore these ideas too when you either make a live action video or share the story in any format with your workforce. And the last thing that we thought, we would cover today was employee engagement. Uh, so there are a lot of events, a lot of methods in which I'm sure you already do this. But to integrate a design thinking based storytelling approach into it, what we can also do is, uh, can we, like for one organization, what we did is they had this huge issue where the team bonding simply did not exist because there was this one generation, uh, which was like this 20 plus year in the organization, and the other generation, which is less than 3 years in the organization, youngsters. So we kind of, created some experiences, some experiential trainings, some storytelling, and then captured these stories. So we also employed reverse coaching in that, How can a youngster probably go to a 50-year-old and tell him how AI is going to get a big part of our job role? So uh, it's not that always AI will take up jobs, You don't always need to look at workforce reduction, but yes, job roles will drastically change when AI comes into your organization. And there, here the young talent is much better positioned to support the people who have spent 20 years in the organization, who sometimes feel a bit lost, right? They have this immense amount of knowledge. They have a lot of personal stories and experiences to share of how they shaped this organization and its success, but they lack somewhere. So this then got spanned into, employee generated content. We created some uh, caricature based stories out of it, which were floated in the organization. And that is how what I and Rohan are trying to, share with you our small bit of understanding is, yes, storytelling, when looked at in this raw manner, can really connect with your workforce, right? And then it's up to you what elements you want to integrate, how many stories you want to cover in a quarter. So either you can look at storytelling as, something like a continuous exercise which will give you the most amount of benefit, or at least what you can do is you can say, okay, this quarter at least let me keep a number of 5 stories in mind. Let me at least roll out 20 stories per year. And believe me, once you start doing this, there are so many stories in your organization, and there are so many interesting formats in which you can share them, that you will be lost. You will be asking, should I create 20 or should I create 200? So that's our take on this, our small suggestion on how you can integrate this much better into the experience of employees. Uh, Now, just a small glimpse of how we do this with organizations with whom we partner. So we have something called as a storytelling live camp. This is typically tailored for teams. Let me again take this as an example. Let's say we were working with a pharma company and the TA team of this pharma company. Now, this TA team has a different kind of profiles where they want to recruit high-end talent, right? Now, we've helped them structure their TA story on, because you cannot take the same narrative to someone who's a fresher from a pharma college and then someone who has spent 10 years in research. So you need to understand the psychographics are different. You need to understand what are his expectations from life at this particular stage, and how will your organization and your growth plan help him combine all of his skill sets. And also, probably he's looking for an exposure in a different vertical. He's looking at exposure in a different country. There are so many things in his mind. How can you, in that interview that you conduct, how can you create that as a safe space to hear his story and share your story, rather than it being a very formal communication in between a candidate and a recruiter? So this was a series of 2 workshops that we did for them, sorry, a 2-day workshop. And the intention is that you have a clear end goal in mind, that you want to make sure that if your TA team has these 10 applications coming in for one open slot, and then out of that you shortlist 3 and then 2 drop off in that 30, 60, 90-day period, right? How can you avoid that? How can you create a feeling of belongingness with the candidate before he is onboarded? So if we have an end goal in mind, we can sit with specific teams of your organization, look at that end goal, apply the design thinking framework, help them to create the stories, do role plays around it. We also integrate something called as booster sessions, 3 weeks and 4 weeks after this, to emphasize the learning that we have got from this session. Similar to the dive camp, we also have something called as a base camp and a lead camp, which is typically either for leadership, senior management, and the base camp is something which is for less than 3 years of experience in your organization. You want them to take up storytelling as a basic skill, not a typical end goal in mind, but let's say we were working with a fintech giant and they wanted that even when a salesperson approaches a retailer, what kind of story of the company's future does he present? Does he take our values on the ground? Does he demonstrate our values through his behavior and the stories that he's sharing? There are, n number of uses to this. And apart from organizations, we also do these boot camps or these kind of sessions with individuals.
Yes, that's rightly said. What Mandar is referring to is something called this business storytelling made easy for L&D. What we've shown you so far is what we do for the corporates, right? When you're to engage storytelling at a corporate level. But you as an L&D professional, if you want to learn business storytelling as a skill set, then we are starting an online cohort in January of 2025. We've only got 10 spots for this. The idea over here is to not have more than 10 people, so it's really quality discussion. Look at different scenarios. So these 10 people bring different contexts, different scenarios to the table. We discuss how they can make stories. We follow the design thinking principle, and they go back with an understanding of how they can use storytelling in what format, in what mediums in their job starting tomorrow when they join. So that's the idea behind this. We'll be sharing more details of this cohort as we go ahead. We are planning this and we're launching this. You can WhatsApp us at this number, and I'll ask Mandar to share the link of this in the chat box as well. So you can do things. If you're interested, you can WhatsApp directly from your mobile phone to this number and mention January 25 cohort, your name, your email, and one of us will get back to you. Or you can use the link that Mandara shared in the chat box, and that will open up a desktop version of WhatsApp, I believe. And if that's comfortable for you, you can do that as well. To express your interest for this, if you want to learn this as a personal skill for you in your personal job, and corporate is different, as I showed you. This is for your personal learning. All right. So it's time for us to take the questions. I'll let Mandar start off with this.
So the first question which we received, which we thought is quite interesting, was how do you imbibe storytelling when you're talking to your CHRO? You have a very small time frame to score your goals, make your points. So something that we have personally used in the session that we conduct is called as a pyramid principle. So in the pyramid principle, uh, instead of getting onto the nitty-gritties of the story, can you share the big idea first, right? And once you share the big idea, then you can build a structure below it. Because since this time slot that Abhilasha mentioned is quite small, and then you also need to make sure that there are a lot of other updates. You have a certain time frame to engage your CHRO or your management into. And obviously, there are a lot of other initiatives that you have to report and say what is the spend happening on, what is the effectiveness of the other initiatives. So typically, what I would advise Abhilasha is if you can refer to the pyramid principle, that will really help you to structure the story. And also, we have shared a lot of techniques in our webinar. We'll also share a recording of this for you to go through it again. The second question that we received was Poonam, and she asked us, how do you get a buy-in for investment from the top management for projects which are very long term? Now, that's a chicken and egg kind of scenario that how do you first get the buy-in? So quite often what happens is the buy-in can be critical. At a certain time, you want certain investment to come in for this quarter. And this is very tricky because since this is something in the future, you don't even have a story in hand. So here we will have to rely, somewhat on fiction storytelling or on the feedback and interaction that you have with your current customers, who is your loyal, dedicated set of customers. And then let's say you're launching a new product line, get them into confidence, have something like a focus group discussion, expose them to this new technology or product or service that you're planning to launch, and see what do they respond. What is it that they feel, would they be aligned to this kind of a product or a service, and probably that can be your suggestion or story that helps management get a buy-in and the investment that you need.
All right, folks. Please, before we take the next question, sincere request: your feedback is a precious gift for us. We love to hear from you. I'm pasting the link to the feedback form in the chat box as we speak. Give me a couple of seconds. Yeah, there you go. No, I'll let that's for so. Okay, how do I choose meeting group chat? Okay. Yeah. So I have pasted the link to the feedback form. Kindly give us a feedback. Let us know if you liked it, you did not like it. Can you give us a suggestion on next topic? What is it that you want to know? We would really love from you. So brickbats as well as praise, both are welcome, and we are not taking this personal. All right. So thank you so much for this. But again, let me take the third question. And I think this is a good time for me to let you know that if you have a question or a comment, kindly put that in the chat box so that we can take it up. Let me go to the third question. This is from Anaga Karvi from Big Basket, and she says, and this is probably a typical question for most people, that presenting data without prior context in a day-long review is very tiring. How can one make it a little more engaging and presentable? Uh, yes, absolutely, Anaga. Presenting data is a nightmare. It puts off people because our brains are not wired for data. Our brains are wired for stories, and that's proven even neurologically. The best way to do is to do role playing. Experiential storytelling is another format of storytelling where you do role playing. You get people involved. If you remember the short video that Mandar showed on these people really feeling it, right, when they were in the theater, right? That's experiential storytelling. Experiential storytelling is when you get people involved in the story. So for you to beat the boredom in a very typical corporate presentation or a data driven presentation is to create a role play. Think of a situation and let people be a part of it, or divide people into certain groups, and each group has a certain characteristics or plays a certain role or has a certain task. We've seen that has a great effect in breaking the monotony and engaging the people. Of course, how you do it is something that you'll have to think and curate. That goes without saying. This is my last question of the day. Again, if you have any questions, kindly feel free to ask that in the chat box. Is there a way different from the usual evaluation techniques can be used to measure effectiveness of stories? Yes, if you remember, each story has a call to action, and that call to action is the best tool to know if your story, your business presentation, or your training program has been effective or not. That call to action could be anything. So if it's a digital story, the call to action could be a link to sign up on a certain form. If it's a role play, the call to action could be creating a situation and asking the learners what happens next. It could be anything. So the call to action is when, if you remember, I in the design thinking questions, I mentioned about what is the outcome you want to achieve. That, if you answer that question, this question becomes very clear to you. The answer to this question becomes very clear to you because you start with that in the mind, that you're not telling story for the sake of telling story. You're telling story to motivate people into action. If you recall the definition that we gave you in the beginning of the presentation, right? So that's what you do. It's built into the story. So you create story with the end in mind. So that's the question here. If you have any questions, feel free. If you have any comments, feel free. If you want to share anything about storytelling that you have done in your organization, or if you have a contrary view to what we have said today and you think that storytelling doesn't work, even we would love to hear that. So anybody who wants to share, please feel free. I'll keep it open for the next few, probably a half a minute or so. We will be sending you this video recording on the call. Just to remind you again, we will all be sending you the link to the January 2025 cohort. If Or you can WhatsApp us as we have shown, and we'll love to know from you. If there are any questions, kindly, this is a good time to let us know if you want to share anything with us. If not, that's also completely fine. So I will let it go here. I want to thank all of you for making time. Hope this was worthwhile. We will see you again in some other webinar with some other topic. on some other Thursday or a Friday. We normally do this on Friday, but we'll be seeing you again. So thank you very much. Have a great Friday tomorrow and a coming weekend. And signing off on behalf of Mandar and myself. Bye bye.